Welcome to the channel. Today, we're exploring some unbelievable story. Stay tuned and let's dive in. Reflecting on my life, I realize that I've always been lured to the security of regularity. While my journey did not develop precisely as I had hoped in my 20s, it took on its own form, which I got used to, with a combination of familiarity and flexibility. Over time, the demands of everyday living established a rhythm that I enjoyed, a consistent mix of work, home, and family commitments. My partner and I managed the first few years of motherhood together, juggling family responsibilities and maintaining our relationship. However, lately everything seemed calmer, as if we had fallen into familiar rhythms. Starting my job as an executive assistant seemed like a new beginning, a means to add meaning to my life and give more to my family. The travel was exciting, allowing me to see new places, attend high-stakes meetings, and have experiences I never expected. My supervisor, Ethan, rapidly became an important part of my adventure, sharing my excitement for each accomplishment and milestone. However, over time, our intimacy altered, and the line between our work and personal lives started to blur. As I awoke, I felt his familiar presence nearby, and we had an intimate time together. We lay intertwined until the alarm rang, signaling the beginning of a new day and bringing us back to reality. My sweetheart got out of bed and went to his neighboring hotel room to get ready for the day. We always rented two linked rooms with an interior door to keep our relationship private. The discovery of our romance would have terrible ramifications. I was Ethan's executive assistant, and we had been working together for just over 2 years, the most of which was spent as a relationship. My job demanded close cooperation and frequent travel across the nation for office visits, client meetings, and industry conferences, which allowed us to spend lots of time together without raising suspicions. Yes, I was married and had a partner at home. Our marriage started fairly suddenly at the age of 16. I was seeing my first boyfriend, Daniel, when things progressed one evening when my parents were gone, and I discovered I was pregnant shortly after. By the time we notified our parents, we had just one option: keep the baby. My parents were upset and advocated for adoption, whilst Daniel's parents supported us to keep the kid and offered to help us complete school. Despite unpleasant remarks from classmates and instructors, Daniel supported me throughout my pregnancy. He protected me, often engaging in fights and even risking suspension. The delivery was intense, but Daniel was at my side. We had our lovely baby daughter, Isabella, 2 days after my 16th birthday. We knew we couldn't let go of her. Initially, my parents withdrew themselves, so we moved in with Daniel's parents and faced the problems of early motherhood. True to their word, his parents assisted with Isabella's early care, enabling us to finish high school. We both got jobs after graduation, had a quiet wedding, and moved into our own tiny house. Our academic ambitions were postponed when another unexpected arrival gifted us with a second daughter, Emma. In brief, after years of hard work, parenting issues, and family support, we completed our university degrees part-time, working and studying alternately while raising our 2 girls. We were in deep love. Daniel cherished his 2 girls and they had a tight relationship. My connection with them became increasingly tense. We clashed constantly, and I sometimes felt hatred against them, as if I was unconsciously blaming them for the life I had hoped for at 16 but never got. After graduating from college, I worked as the executive assistant to Ethan Turner, the business development manager for a medical equipment firm. I was 25 and he was 32. Ethan and I rapidly developed a good professional connection. I was prospering in my position, sales were up, management was delighted, and I had earned a significant increase. For the first time, I felt like I was living a steady and regular existence. My profession required a significant amount of travel, frequently overnight. I sometimes went alone, but more often than not, I traveled with Ethan, discovering new areas around the nation, seeing customers, negotiating agreements, and engaging with high-level executives. It was exciting. I was acquiring invaluable experience and really enjoying every minute. I was away from home around 3 weeks out of every 4, with stays ranging from 1 night to a full week or more, including rare weekends. While the work and travel were excellent, I spent a lot of time away from Daniel and our girls, with Daniel doing the majority of the parenting chores. Spending so much time with Ethan allowed me to get to know him well. Despite our age gap, he had been married almost as long as I had and had 3 small children. To prevent Daniel from worrying about my frequent trips with Ethan, I told him a minor lie: I normally traveled alone or with another lady. I also said that, although I got along with Ethan professionally, I found him tough on a personal level. In truth, Ethan was both charming and intriguing. I was interested and profoundly drawn to him. I enjoyed our time together and looked forward to our nights spent in snug restaurants where we'd eat, drink wine, and speak for hours. One night, approximately 7 months into my career, Ethan and I celebrated securing a significant sales order earlier in the day. We ordered a gourmet supper and split a bottle of high-quality French champagne. As we sat there, somewhat tipsy and thrilled, he leaned across the table, put his hand on mine, and looked into my eyes. He continued, "Natalie, you know I'm falling hard for you." My pulse raced and I couldn't speak. After a time, he rose and extended his hand to me. I paused momentarily before taking his hand and following him up to his hotel room. Inside, we spent a wonderful night together. We awoke in the morning and made delicate love, an experience that felt like pure joy. With our trip home not until late in the morning, we got breakfast, reclined in bed, and had another romantic moment before leaving. On the journey home, I felt guilty about my unfaithfulness. Rationalizing it, I considered how I had never had the opportunity to explore other relationships when I was younger, and I felt I deserved this opportunity. Furthermore, I resented my spouse for abandoning me, particularly because our physical life had not entirely recovered from the rough early years of our marriage. I immediately recalled I'd been so focused on Ethan the night before that I neglected to contact Emma and wish her a happy birthday. She had just turned 13 and was growing very quickly. Ethan grinned and gripped my hand as he sat next to me on the aircraft. Despite knowing it was wrong, I felt a strong attraction to him. When I got home, remorse struck me hard. Daniel was overjoyed to see me after a week apart, but I moved away from his embraces and kisses. Later that night, when he sought to get intimate, I declined, stating I was too sleepy. In reality, I was fatigued and aching after my night with Ethan. It was the first time I had ever turned Daniel down. 18 months have gone, and my connection with Ethan is as passionate as ever. Over time, I learned to deal with my guilt by turning off some of my emotions at home. I didn't understand how emotionally distant I was from Daniel and our girls. My thoughts were always focused on Ethan and when we might be together again. Lying became second nature, and I gradually felt less guilty. I had developed strong feelings for Ethan and had pondered leaving Daniel to be with him. We even laughed about it while sleeping together, while knowing it would be a huge choice with serious ramifications, particularly for our children. As our firm grew, we traveled more often. When no work excursions were planned, we would stage an overnight business trip to a neighboring city and stay at a hotel. We also took periodic mini-vacations for anniversaries and birthdays, disguised as conferences in exotic destinations, frequently in wonderful beach resorts where a genuine conference served as our alibi. At work, we were very careful, maintaining a professional demeanor and never slipping away to meet secretly. We booked meals at various times, came and went separately, and kept any one-on-one interactions professional. We communicated using private email accounts outside of the work system and avoided meeting in person at workplace gatherings. We only socialized in huge groups, never sitting together or having individual chats. To prevent surprises, I would phone home at certain times each day. I never exchanged hotel information, and Daniel never inquired. I constantly complained to him about my stubborn employer, the continual travel, and the difficult workload. Daniel often advised seeking a job with less travel and a nicer supervisor, but I told him I was learning too much and earning too much to quit. At business occasions when partners were invited, we were cautious to keep our reactions and emotions under control. I presented my partner to my employer, who introduced us to his wife. We kept our encounters short and courteous, conversing briefly before going on to engage with other co-workers and never looking at each other. After that, we were very careful to hide our tracks, and no one ever suspected anything. My boyfriend Daniel was pleased to see me succeed at work, but he was also annoyed by my frequent absences, which forced him to do the majority of the parenting on top of his own consulting work. I still loved Daniel, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were slipping apart. He was constantly preoccupied with the children and his job, and I felt a stab of regret at how infrequent our private times had become and how little love we now shared. I decided to make an attempt to reconnect with him. We had a difficult start, having our first kid at 16, married at 18, and bringing another child shortly after. We both graduated from college, me with an IT degree and Daniel with a commerce degree, while raising our two girls. Despite the difficulties, we didn't mind since we cared profoundly for one another. When I got my first professional job after graduating around 2 years ago, I was overjoyed, and Daniel was quite proud of me. Finally, we both had steady, well-paying employment, allowing us to live a more balanced life together. Initially, I was entirely supportive of Daniel's employment, but I became irritated with the long hours and travel required by his job. He left his house at 7 a.m. They frequently didn't return until 6 or 7 p.m. Most weeks, he was gone 1 or 2 nights, perhaps longer, and didn't return until Saturday afternoon. When he was home throughout the week, he either worked after supper or relaxed in front of the television. On Saturdays, he would sleep in and then go shopping. On Sundays, he would go to the gym in the morning before meeting his buddies for brunch. He was generally too fatigued to make any evening arrangements with me. We did not have much quality time as a family. He often appeared too busy to take a vacation, so the children and I frequently went on vacation without him. I saw changes in his demeanor. The loving spouse and parent I knew was becoming distant, impatient, and self-centered. Our physical relationship had deteriorated, and I found myself becoming more upset and angered whenever I attempted to address it with him. He rejected my worries, claiming they were all in my brain or that he was just weary from working hard for us and that our private life was perfect. I was concerned about where things were headed. At the conclusion of his first year on the job, I was invited to the CEO's house for a company Christmas celebration. There I met his employer, Ethan, and his wife for the first time. We had a nice, quick talk before they left to socialize. My boyfriend directed me to others and began talking with his colleagues. Later, it struck me as odd, Ethan seemed to be a kind, although slightly reticent, guy, rather than the rough figure he depicted. Ethan's wife was also very nice. Given that my companion was his executive assistant, I had anticipated a more engaged discussion than a courteous one. I could tell my companion was worried since she spoke rapidly. I thought it unusual that she seemed scared around her boss, given how closely they worked together. Though I entirely trusted her, I tucked the notion aside for later consideration. Over the following year, I was incredibly busy, and I decided to create my own consulting business. Furthermore, I was parenting our girls nearly completely on my own, so I dismissed the most of my worries about my spouse. Life with her seemed similar to the previous year. She was traveling considerably more and became progressively remote from all three of us. I had lately observed that her attitude toward me had become dismissive and condescending. She gave me little love, and our closeness was almost non-existent. On rare times, she would interact, but it seemed mechanical and lacked genuine warmth. It was evident that our connection was crumbling. At the end of the year, I went to the company's Christmas party again. Our short encounter with Ethan was very similar to the prior year. I wondered if she was concealing anything. For the first time since we began dating, I had reservations. Could there be anybody else? The concept was hard to grasp. We had worked so hard together to overcome obstacles and get to where we were today. She wouldn't do that, would she? What will her do? I didn't go as far as hiring a private detective or inspecting her computer, but I did begin to pay closer attention to her. I didn't see anything out of place either. It was all in my head, or she was really good at concealing her traces. Things weren't going well between us, but I was too busy to think about it. Meanwhile, our girls grew up swiftly. Isabella, now 15, was developing into a stunning young lady, while Emma, at 13, was on the verge of puberty. We spent a lot of time together and formed a deep relationship, but regrettably, their mother had little time for them. Both daughters enjoyed playing soccer, so I would watch them every Saturday morning throughout the season. It was the highlight of my week. After the game, we'd have lunch at their favorite Japanese restaurant and catch up on what they were up to. I observed that they seldom discussed their mother. Depending on the weather, we'd go for a stroll on the beach, see a movie, or meet up with friends. Emma returned from the opening game of the season with a new colleague. She was a stunning young girl, tall and lovely, with a broad grin, long black hair, and deep brown eyes. She was plainly sporty. She had already made an impact in her first games, scoring 2 goals. "Hey, Dad. This is Sophia. Can I go to a residence this afternoon? Hi, Sophia, nice to meet you, I told her. Sure, Emma, as long as Sophia's parents are okay with it. Sophia turned to summon her mother, who was standing close. A lady, presumably Sophia's mother, turned and approached us. I was astounded. She seemed like an adult version of her kid, very stunning. She introduced herself as Julia and agreed that Emma may come over that afternoon. We spoke a little, but I'm not sure what I said. I realized I was rambling a little, and as they departed, my girls broke out laughing at my evident discomfort. That evening, Emma told me more about Julia. Apparently, she was a single mother. Sophia's father died in a car accident 4 years earlier, and she was now parenting Sophia and her younger son, Leo, who was 10. The single mom facts really piqued my interest. The next Saturday, when Isabella and I were watching Emma's soccer game, Julia came over with her kid and asked if they might join us. I had prepared myself this time and was determined to be more calm. We spoke throughout the game, and Julia explained that she had just relocated to town for a new work and didn't know many people yet. She was pleased that Sophia and Emma had become friends and praised Emma for her exemplary manners. Emma approached Sophia after the game and asked if she may visit us. I answered that it was all right with me as long as Julia agreed, which she did. I then invited Sophia to join us for lunch and asked whether she liked sushi. Sophia answered warmly, saying she liked it. I added that everything was decided and, on the spur of the moment, invited them all to join us for lunch. Julia thanked me but refused, stating she did not want to impose on our family. Feeling a little disappointed, I then heard Isabella invite Julia to join us, stating it would be nice to have her company and that she would enjoy having another woman to chat to, assuring Julia that she would not be intruding. Julia glanced at me and said she'd love to join us if it wasn't too much effort. I nodded and mustered a remark, which was probably rather garbled. As we turned to go back to our vehicles, Isabella sneered at me, winked, and smiled. Lunch turned out to be a huge success. Specifically, the 4 females ended up conversing for about 2 hours. I believe Leo loved having another man around, and we spoke a little about computers and football. I overheard Julia casually ask my children whether their mother had ever been to see their soccer games. Isabella's reaction took me off guard. No, never. She shows little interest in us. She is more focused on her career and herself. Our father also serves as our mother. He is the one who takes care of us. Julia gave me a strange look. For the remainder of the soccer season, it became customary to eat lunch together after each game. Emma and Sophia became closer, often rotating between our homes thereafter, and sometimes even after school. Leo sometimes came over with his sister, but he preferred to spend time with me. We'd experiment with computers, kick around a soccer ball, or go riding. I observed Isabella started to visit Julia, and the two of them would often go shopping together, pausing for coffee and girl chat. I also saw that neither my girls nor I mentioned Julia to their mother. Isabella and I were also becoming close friends, and since I was a single mom like her, helping each other out made things simpler. After the soccer season finished, our children began to spend Saturday afternoons on their own, visiting friends or going on adventures. With my wife seldom there, I had a lot of spare time, so Julia and I spent it together, going for walks, eating a leisurely lunch, or seeing a movie. I found myself looking forward to these encounters and recognized I was developing affections for her, even though we never went any farther than friendship. One day, over coffee, I thanked Julia for her time with Isabella. You know, she never stops talking about you when she returns home. Julia this, Julia that, I joked. Julia grinned and said, Leo is the same after seeing you. Mark this, mark that. To be honest, he needs a masculine role model in his life, so I appreciate you spending time with him. Suddenly, she said, forgive me for being direct, Mark, but it's pretty clear things aren't all that great between you and your wife. We had usually avoided talking about my girlfriend, so her statement threw me off guard. I sat there in quiet for about 30 seconds, recognizing I had been avoiding this subject for a long time. The fact is, Julia, if it hadn't been for the girls, I'd probably have gone long ago. Things have been horrible for years. I've tried talking to her many times, but I've encountered a brick wall. Our marriage had been difficult from the beginning. I'm sure Isabella told you how my partner and I ended up getting married, I said. Yes, and she actually feels a bit responsible for your situation, Julia told you. It's ridiculous, of course, and I've been telling her it's absolutely not her fault. I broke down my own boundaries and spent the next hour dumping all of my problems on Julia. When I finished, she rushed up and hugged me firmly. It was the first genuine embrace I'd had in years. In there anytime you need me, Mark. You are aware of this. I embraced her tightly, unwilling to let go. My partner's annual work Christmas party arrived shortly after, as another year came to a close. My reintroduction to her supervisor, Ethan, proceeded similarly to the previous 2 years, but this time I was on high alert. My spouse and her employer were more at ease around one another, but something felt odd. I was clearly becoming skeptical. Later that evening, my partner excused herself to visit the toilet. A minute later, I spotted Ethan casually walking upstairs as well. I decided to follow and seek for her. She wasn't in the restroom, so I looked around the enormous home. As I was about to walk through a slightly ajar bedroom door, I heard her voice within. "Merry Christmas, my darling," she murmured. A man's voice said, "Merry Christmas, my love." Peeking through the opening, I saw my partner and her boss sharing a lengthy, passionate kiss, their hands all over one another. Shocked, I took a fast step back. I returned downstairs, reeling and considering my next move. Beyond fury, I felt empty. I'm not the kind to confront someone right away, so I cooled myself and decided to look into it later. My companion returned looking flushed, and she spent the rest of the night pretending to be my loving wife. I carried on as if nothing had occurred. By New Year's, I had gained access to her phone and laptop while she was sleeping. She should have known better. Leaving damning information on her own computer was not advisable, particularly since her husband works in computer security. My greatest worries have been fulfilled. In her professional, personal, and hidden email accounts, I discovered incriminating proof. My spouse had a long-term, serious affair with her supervisor that began more than 2 years ago. There were explicit images and recordings of them together, highlighting the extent of her treachery. Their communications even hinted at plans to leave their respective spouses and be together. I realized I had been a naive and unaware spouse. I placed concealed surveillance software on her phone and laptop, enabling me to remotely monitor her electronic and physical movements if necessary. My marriage was plainly finished, and now my first objective was to preserve custody of my girls while also preserving my company and assets. After the new year, I spoke with a divorce lawyer who explained that divorces are no fault, so I couldn't file based on adultery. In terms of custody, she emphasized that once children reach the age of 15, they have the option of living with either parent. She also assisted in developing a plan to safeguard my firm throughout the divorce proceedings. Emma turns 15 in 7 months, so I figured I could live with my boyfriend until then, giving me time to prepare. To make it work, I'd need to hide everything from her. I informed Julia what I had discovered, and she burst into tears. I was surprised. I expected to be the one seeking consolation. I embraced her, and she sobbed as she told me that her late husband died in a car accident with his secretary, with whom she subsequently discovered he had an affair, exacerbating her grief. After she calmed down, we spoke about my decision to leave my boyfriend. Julia just grinned knowingly. To begin, I convinced my partner that, because we were both working well, we could sell our little property and rent a bigger one while looking for our ideal home, with the equity serving as a down payment. She readily agreed, and our property sold swiftly. We leased a neighboring property with a 6-month lease in my name solely. Sharing a bed with my boyfriend was awful, and when we relocated, I faked a nasty cold as an excuse to sleep in the spare room rather than spread it. I just never returned, and she didn't mention anything. Maybe she didn't notice, or maybe she liked it that way. Next, I confided in my father and asked him to set up a new consulting business with him as the official owner and me as the lone employee. I immediately dissolved my firm and started working under his. Everything was going as planned until one day, Isabella approached me, apprehensive and scared. My immediate thought with a pang of déjà vu was that she might be pregnant, just like her mom had been. "Dad, this is really hard to tell you, but Mom is having an affair with her boss," she informed me. I couldn't believe she knew, and I was at a loss for words. "Why are you thinking that?" "Well, soon after we moved in here, Emma and I went back to the previous home to get something she had forgotten. Mom and her supervisor were present. That is odd, but it does not always indicate anything. They were having an intimate moment on the floor of the living room. After getting past my first astonishment, I said, "I know about the affair, Isabella. I've known for a while." "So why don't you do something about it?" Isabella inquired. "Did Emma see them, too?" "Yes," Isabella said, inviting Emma over, who had been listening close. She entered the room feeling ashamed. I held them both, knowing how hard it must have been for them to see, particularly Emma. "Can you both maintain a huge secret?" I asked. They nodded. "I am intending to leave your mother shortly. I'm simply waiting for Emma to age 15 so you can legally choose where you want to live with me." They both screamed simultaneously, "It won't be easy keeping the secret, but we can't let Mom suspect anything until then." They exchanged a furtive look. After that, I asked Julia to have a heart-to-heart with Isabella, who had her first boyfriend. I did not want her to follow in her mother's footsteps. Fortunately, my partner was not there very much, so we could deal with her infrequent appearance while keeping our intentions a secret. We enjoyed ourselves even more while she was gone, knowing that the end was approaching. We were spending more and more time with Julia and her children, often having meals and going out together. One Saturday afternoon, when my spouse was supposed to be at a conference for the weekend but was really with her employer at a hotel, Isabella declared, "Dad, I'm babysitting Julia tonight." "Oh, really? What is she doing?" I asked. "She's going on a dinner date with a guy at Brasserie Rome, that fancy French place downtown." I instantly felt a rush of envy and tried desperately to conceal it. Isabella gazed at me with pity and amusement. "She is going out with you, Dad. It's time you both went on a proper date. I have booked the appointment, so just contact her and ask her the right questions." She gave me my phone. "What if she does not want to go on a date with me? We're just buddies, after all. I do not want to make her feel uncomfortable." "How you managed to get through college is beyond me," Isabella replied with a sneer. "Just call her." So I did. Isabella sounded ecstatic and accepted immediately. I got the impression that this was not a surprise to her. That evening, it took me 3 tries before my girls agreed that I was dressed appropriately for supper. As I was ready to depart, Sophia and Leo came. Isabella smiled and gave me an already packed overnight bag after seeing my inquisitive expression. Clearly, our children had collaborated on this scheme. When I arrived, Julia welcomed me at the door. She wore a tight black cocktail dress with a plunging neckline and high heels. The dress fitted every curve of her athletic physique, and her long black hair was pulled to one side in a loose braid. "Well, say something, Mark," she urged with a twist. "I'm speechless," I said. "Do you like?" she inquired, her grin beguiling. "Oh, much more than like," I said. We enjoyed a lovely supper and spent the whole time enjoying one another's company. When we arrived at her house door at the conclusion of the evening, I remarked, "I know our kids arranged for me to stay the night, but you don't have to feel." She put a finger to my lips and murmured, "I'm counting on you staying," before leading me inside and up to her bedroom. I had no intention of disagreeing with it. We were both nervous and bashful at first since it was our first time meeting someone new. If I thought she was beautiful before, seeing her without clothing was spectacular. We quickly relaxed and truly embraced the occasion. I let go of all my pent-up aggravation, both mental and physical, and felt like I was in complete joy. By the end, I was absolutely exhausted. The next morning, we made lovely love again. After that, we lingered in bed, enjoying the afterglow and the warmth of our bodies interwoven. It had been a long time for each of us, and everything felt just perfect. We soon heard footsteps on the stairs, talking, and a knock on the door, which eventually opened. Isabella stuck her head inside. "Good morning, you both. It's already 10 o'clock, and we're bored of waiting, so we came over. Breakfast will be served downstairs in 20 minutes. Oh, and I was going to ask if you had a good evening, but judging by your faces, there's no need," she said. We heard laughs as everyone went away. They cooked a fantastic breakfast, and it was nice to have it together, almost like a family. Later, at home, I tried to explain to my girls what had transpired with Julia, reminding them that I was still officially married. They replied by rolling their eyes and giggling at my embarrassment, telling me it was time for me to be joyful again. They argued that I wasn't really married to their mother anymore since she had emotionally departed a long time ago. When I inquired what they were all up to with this huge conspiracy, they disclosed that they'd all agreed that Emma and I needed a mother, Sophia and Leo needed a father, and Julia and I belonged together, making it a win-win for everyone. Still apprehensive, I said that even if I felt it was a good idea, Julia may not agree. They chuckled, telling me to recognize how evident her emotions were and that I should be able to discern what she wanted. When I inquired whether I had any say in this, they laughed and told me that I had no option. They found my discomfort rather amusing, and it was evident that I was now being strongly steered by my daughters. A few days later, during dinner with everyone there, I said that I planned to start home searching the following weekend. Julia, inquisitive, said, "What type of home are you searching for?" "I'm looking for a 2-story home near the beach with a large family room, a kids' escape room, a large backyard, and a pool. It requires at least 6 bedrooms in case my family expands in the future," I said, staring squarely at her. "And I want to be sure that a woman I might be falling head over heels for would like it too." Julia kept my stare for a long time before walking over and kissing me passionately in front of the children. When we eventually parted ways, the kids observed in quiet for a time before erupting into shouts and dancing around us. I took that as a yes. After a few weeks of looking, we discovered the ideal house. We agreed to purchase it jointly, with her late husband's life insurance money and the profits from my home sale serving as a deposit. As Emma's 15th birthday neared, the scene was set for a fight with my spouse. Rachel mentioned that she will be attending a week-long sales convention on the West Coast. Checking her emails later, I found that she was on vacation with her employer to celebrate their 3rd anniversary in the Maldives, Indonesia. To keep this a secret, they each informed colleagues that they were going on family vacations to compensate for the time they'd been devoting to work. Rachel would depart a day before her employer and travel alone with him the next day. To keep the tale credible, she planned to return a day sooner than he would. They were becoming sloppy. This idea was far from flawless and could easily fail if anybody took the time to investigate it. After Rachel went out for her conference, we immediately started packing and moved into our new home, where Julia and her children had settled a month before. If there is a Balan god of revenge, it must have smiled upon me. Mount Agung, the Maldives' active volcano, erupted the same evening Rachel arrived, sending clouds of volcanic ash into the air. All flights into and out of the Maldives were promptly cancelled, and Rachel's boyfriend remained at home while she was trapped in the Maldives alone for their anniversary. I almost passed out laughing. It was almost too good to be true. The volcanic activity persisted, and aircraft were grounded, keeping the two apart. Behind the scenes, I examined Rachel's emails and texts on a regular basis for entertainment. The two of them were unhappy with the situation, and Rachel was becoming more furious with Ethan, as if it was his fault. Rachel would sometimes phone home, telling us how busy she was with the conference, and I would inquire about the hotel and location she claimed to be in. Later, when I entered her laptop remotely, I discovered she had been feverishly browsing the internet for facts to provide me with credible replies. Meanwhile, the 6 of us were settling in well to our new house. I had my lawyer submit a formal separation paperwork to the family court. I also acquired temporary custody of my girls by submitting their written pleas to reside with me. As Rachel's return date approached, planes remained cancelled, leaving me worried how she would handle the situation. One evening, she phoned to say she'd established several good sales contacts at the conference and that her employer had requested her to remain later to follow up on them before returning home. I could see she was apprehensive, but luckily for her, it wasn't a video call, so I couldn't keep a straight face. I merely told her that everything was great and that I understood. After another week of being trapped in the Maldives, I watched as Rachel and her supervisor exchanged anxious emails and texts. He notified everyone at work that she needed to prolong her absence due to a family emergency. Her manager even contacted me to apologize sincerely for keeping Rachel away for so long, but maintained it was an important chance for the firm. I had expected his call and was prepared to reply as the understanding husband of a busy professional lady. I told him that everything was okay and that I understood before casually asking where Rachel would be heading next. He struggled to recall a few locations. I subsequently saw the email in which he passed the information to Rachel so she knew where she was supposed to be. My objective was to make her anxious by sowing seeds of doubt that she had been discovered. Each time she phoned, I comforted her while also asking precise questions about the locations and cities she claimed to be seeing. I could see she had done her study ahead of time, so I tossed in a few unexpected questions to see how she would react, all while pretending to be a naive spouse. During one chat, I said, "Hey, Rachel, have you heard about those unfortunate folks trapped in the Maldives who can't come home due to the volcano?" After a little pause, she said, "Oh sure, but I haven't paid much attention to the news. One of my co-workers has been stranded there for 3 weeks. Do you remember Paul Howard and his wife, who we met around 7 months ago?" "Oh, sure, we are working on a project and he has been working remotely from his hotel in Marfusha. At least the Hilton Resort isn't a terrible location to be stranded." Rachel took a quick breath in and I heard it. She was, of course, staying at the Hilton Resort, even though Paul was not even in the Maldives, but she was unaware of this. She traveled to a cheap hotel on the opposite side of the island as soon as she received the phone call, most likely intending to conceal her identity. My 5 girls, yes, Julia's children were now mine, found the whole thing amusing. Finally, over 3 weeks later, the volcanic outbursts subsided and flights resumed from the Maldives. Rachel phoned to let me know her job was over and she'd be home Saturday afternoon. I waited for her return to our leased, now empty home. I had carefully scheduled this encounter. When she came, I was seated at the kitchen table, holding 2 glasses and a bottle of wine. She came looking exhausted and worried, with a deep tan that seemed out of place for someone purportedly on a business trip. I avoided the compulsory cheek kiss. "Wow, you've gotten quite the tan from your business trip. Did you get any work done?" I asked. She stuttered something, her cheeks flushing. "Sit down and have a glass of wine with me." "I am fatigued. I just want to go upstairs, take a shower, and relax before dinner," she replied, but I interrupted her. "I apologize, but there is something we need to talk. We are here right now. So, please sit down." I also said that the girls were sleeping overnight with a friend so that we wouldn't be disturbed. Rachel's expression was filled with anxiety, as if she had run out of time. But she didn't know how I intended to tackle this. She reluctantly sat down, and I poured her a drink. I had practiced my speech many times, making certain to maintain a mournful look. "You know, Rachel, things between us haven't been going well for a time. Do you know why that is?" She looked horrified and could only say a feeble no. "I apologize, Rachel, there is no simple way to say this. The reality is, I have met someone else. I love her and want to be with her, therefore I'm leaving you." In a second, disbelief replaced her terrified expression and wrath took over as she sat there, stunned. I continued, maintaining an apologetic tone. "I never planned for this to happen. You were gone so much. I suppose I simply felt lonely. How could you do this to me, Mark, after all I've done for you?" She yelled out, her voice brimming with rage and accusations. I sat silently, retaining a mournful expression while she ranted for 5 minutes. "I see you," I said, "and I understand. There's no use in debating this further. I'll return tomorrow afternoon at 4 so we can discuss further. There's a lot to figure out." I departed, ignoring her subsequent furious messages and voicemails. When I got home, everyone wanted to hear how it went. Even better than expected, I responded. We ate pizza for supper and watched a movie together. The girls switched off their phones to avoid their mother, but I reminded them that they couldn't cut off communication with her completely. "Why didn't you confront her about the affair?" Isabella inquired. "Because leaving her this way would be far more painful," was my response. That night, Isabella and I experienced sweet love, and all of our worries and anxiety seemed to wash away. The following day, I arrived to the old home with a folder full of documentation. I was welcomed by Rachel, who was still extremely upset, and her closest friend, Vanessa, a lawyer I had never liked. I had read earlier emails in which Vanessa urged Rachel to prolong the affair while Rachel was feeling bad and pondering quitting it. I sat at the table across from them, ready to go. Vanessa seized the initiative, obviously aiming for an assertive approach. She went on a long diatribe, calling me a bad husband and praising Rachel as a beautiful wife and mother. She accused me of taking advantage of Rachel while she was abroad, working hard for the family, and insisted that I ask Rachel's forgiveness. Vanessa said that if I didn't reconnect, Rachel would clean me out during the divorce, take custody of the children, and I'd never see them again. As hypocritical as it was, they seemed to think that if I had known about Rachel's romance with her employer, I would have tackled it last night. I maintained a regretful, apologetic, and somewhat bewildered face. Rachel, I understand how hard this must be for you, but I'm startled by how furious you are. For a long time, I didn't feel like you loved me. You have been physically and emotionally detached from our marriage for the last 4 years. That is total nonsense, Mark. Of course, I have been here. Yes, I work a lot, which occasionally pulls me away, but it's for us, Rachel snapped. So, Rachel, tell me, when was the last time we made love? I asked. Rachel remained mute. I can tell you, it was 4 years ago, I said. That is not correct at all. We have sex. Yes, very infrequently, but I was discussing making love. I even recall the precise moment. 4 years ago, you were on a business trip and failed to contact Emma on her 11th birthday. She tried calling you many times that evening but was unable to reach you. She was devastated. I remember it well since Emma's birthday was just 3 weeks ago and you failed to contact her while you were traveling again. It felt like the anniversary of something painful. Rachel gave me a guilty look. After you returned from that trip 4 years ago, things between us were never the same. I could see from their reactions that I had struck a chord. They both seemed uncomfortable and exchanged awkward stares. After all, Rachel, we have been sleeping in separate beds for approximately 7 months now. That didn't appear to worry you. I can't recall the last time we went out together or went on vacation. It almost seems like you're having a vacation at work. They both flinched. You aren't really present while you're at home. Not with me or the girls. I laughed internally as I watched them squirm. In any case, Rachel, I apologize, but I'm going to go ahead. I'm hoping we can make this separation as easy as possible for the daughter's benefit. There's no hope of reconciliation. Vanessa glanced at me with disgust. Who is she? Do I know her? You've met her daughter, Sophia, Emma's best friend, I told you. Her mother, Julia, and I met last year at Saturday Soccer and became friends. Over time, our friendship evolved into love. We've been in a relationship and lately chose to live together. Before they could react, I put a huge, well-organized folder on the table. I've prepared some documents for you, I said. Tab A is a legal separation agreement that I filed in court 3 weeks ago. Tab B is a divorce application for you to sign. The sooner you sign it, the quicker we can proceed. Tab C describes a possible financial settlement. Tab D has a new rental agreement for this residence. The lease ends in 3 weeks, so if you want to remain, you must renew it in your name. Tab E lists all of the utility contracts that have 3-week termination notices. If you wish to remain, you must transfer them to your name. Tab F shows bank statements. I have stolen 60% of the cash in our joint accounts, credit cards, and you are now exclusively responsible for them. Finally, Tab G is an interim custody and child support order. The girls chose to reside with me, thus I have custody. Child support will be collected automatically from your income, and visitation is flexible, so we can work out a plan. They were obviously taken aback by how fully prepared I was. Vanessa, unable to control herself, sneered. You've been planning this for ages, haven't you? Yes, I have been preparing since Christmas, I said quietly. At your staff Christmas party, Rachel, I realized things were truly over and it was time to act. I could see Rachel attempting to recall what occurred that night. So selling one property to acquire another was a sham? Vanessa questioned accusingly. I just grinned. There is nothing to steal, Vanessa. I closed my business months ago. I am now employed by someone else. I purchased a new home with Julia after filing for divorce, thus it is not a marital asset. Because I had legal custody of the daughters, I utilized 60% of the house sale proceeds to buy our new home. So, honestly, I'm not sure what you can do here. Vanessa's cheeks flushed crimson. As for custody, state law permits children over the age of 15 to pick where they reside. And they chose me. You truly are a lowlife, Mark. Vanessa screamed. I bet you poisoned the girls against Rachel. I would not do it. I'm not that kind of person, I said. Even if I wanted to affect them, I didn't have to. Rachel had done it herself by ignoring them for the last 4 years. Rachel seemed completely dejected. Vanessa maintained that Rachel had not neglected the kids and that she was a decent mother. I responded that the daughters did not view it that way, noting that Rachel had been virtually gone from their lives for years. I then asked Rachel to analyze who genuinely met their needs. Who fed them, drove them to sports, packed their school lunches, assisted with schoolwork, purchased them clothing, remembered their birthdays, and gave them gifts. Who went to the movies with them, listened to their issues, supported them throughout their first periods, and showed them love and affection. I left the question open, and Rachel was quiet, clearly attempting to digest everything. I then told her that the girls had requested if she might meet them for breakfast the following morning at 10 a.m. at the beachside cafe. I stated it was my proposal, since they were not really keen to meet her. I asked whether I should tell them, and she just nodded. I left them and went back home to my folks. The following day, the girls stated that Rachel had spent the whole day berating me and insisting that they move in with her. Finally, they excused themselves to go to the toilet and discreetly left instead. I couldn't understand why she wanted to reconcile when she hadn't cared about me in years. Maybe I was simply a handy babysitter and cleaner. Rachel informed me she was leaving me for someone else, which took me completely by surprise. How could she? I believed she loved me. Even after I attempted many times to speak about reconciliation, she was uninterested, and our only contact was when we picked up or dropped off our girls for visits. The females were overtly unfriendly, so spending time with them was awkward. When I left kids off, they'd rush to their new stepmother and embrace her, evidently trying to annoy me. Eventually, I told them not to come unless they absolutely wanted to. I had always imagined my life continuing as it was, with my boyfriend for my pleasure, while Mark cared for me at home. The shock of Mark's departure was heartbreaking. Over the ensuing months, I learned that, although his choice was unexpected, it should not have been. Mark was correct in many respects. I had been absent as a wife. I had poured practically all of my devotion, emotional closeness, and intimacy into Ethan during the prior 4 years, leaving nothing for Mark. The real surprise was how long had remained. My girls looked more happy, treating Julia as a mother figure rather than me. I had become an uncomfortable reminder of their past, someone they felt forced to visit on occasion. That was really painful. I believe I struck rock bottom when I began moaning to my girls about my predicament. Hannah gave me a chilly gaze and said that I had practically put Dad away. I explained to her that I hadn't been a great wife and may have neglected them, but he was the one who had abandoned me for another woman. Hannah corrected me, saying that he had gone because I had been having an affair with my employer for 4 years. The look of dread on my face said volumes. I felt utterly embarrassed. Mark had known the whole time but opted to remain quiet. My life was in disarray. I realized I had thrown away a lovely spouse and almost lost my children. True to his word, Mark had pushed the girls to stay in touch with me, reminding me that I still had a lot of work to do to rebuild our connection. The girls gradually started to visit on their own and sometimes remained the night. One evening, when I left the girls off at their new home, I asked Mark if we could have a quick conversation, and he walked with me to the vehicle. I apologized to him after learning from Hannah that he knew about Ethan and me. I confessed that he had been a nice spouse and did not deserve what I had done. I admitted that I had been selfish and gotten what I deserved. Mark merely nodded. I then asked why he hadn't told me he knew, wondering if he could have stopped me before it was too late to save our marriage. He stated that when he found out, it was too late. Curious, I asked him when he first found it. Mark explained that he had spotted me slipping away with Ethan at the corporate Christmas party the previous year and had later discovered everything. I flushed profusely, feeling a wave of embarrassment. Mark admits that he was amused when I was trapped in the Maldives, alone and unhappy. I asked if he hated me and why he hadn't confronted me. I told him. He said that he had been furious but wanted me to feel his sorrow and face the consequences. He informed me that he had uncovered that I had not been Ethan's first assistant and that Ethan had a history of capturing and dumping. Given Ethan's background, Mark determined that the best punishment was to remain silent and let events develop. He reasoned that if the affair remained covert, Ethan would drag me along for a time before losing interest and finally abandoning me. Mark was terrified that if he confronted me and the affair became public, Ethan's wife would divorce him, leaving Ethan free to be with me and escape any repercussions. He also acknowledged that he felt it would hurt me more if I thought he had just left for another lady. I have to say, Mark, that your strategy worked well. You certainly got your vengeance, I said. My life has completely fallen apart. He responded, I suppose, looking back, I'm a little sorry you were hurt so badly, just a bit. To be honest, there's no need to apologize. That was my fault. I softened my voice as I replied, if you had done what I did, I would have walked out on you as well. Looking back, I was caught up in the thrill and got reliant on it. I attempted to halt early on, but by then, I had gone too far. I grew so infatuated with Ethan and concentrated on my own desires that I neglected Mark and the girls for a spell. My wrath subsided. Now, I'm more philosophical about it. After all, I wouldn't be with Julia now if you hadn't cheated. I know I said that's what hurts the most. Our marriage was difficult from the start, Rachel, and I don't believe you're a bad person. Yes, you committed a major error, but he was a master manipulator. You never had the opportunity to grow up naturally, enjoy your adolescence, and discover who you actually wanted to spend your life with. You were ripe for plucking, and he took full advantage. You're probably right, Mark, I said, my voice dropping off. But why did you need to tell the girls about him? That was just too harsh. No surprise they disliked me. I haven't told them, Rachel. They told me. What? How they returned to our old house unexpectedly and discovered you two in action in the living room, he said. It happened shortly after we took our belongings out. I couldn't recall at first, but then it struck me with terror. What did they see? Pretty much everything, Mark said quietly. Even Emma. Hannah provided me a detailed depiction. My body seemed to collapse beneath the weight of it, and I started sobbing hysterically, completely unaware of my surroundings. I'm not sure how long I sobbed, but I felt Mark's arms around me, holding me securely as I buried my head in his chest. That old comfort just made me weep more. I had a faint sensation of being lifted and taken inside, then gently placed down on the sofa. I felt really bad. Everyone, including Mark's new companion, Julia, was really friendly. She urged that I remain and cool myself before joining them for supper. Mark seemed cheerful as he sat around the table with his new family. I realized how severely I had botched up. Later, as I was walking out to my vehicle, Mark placed his hands on my shoulders. Rachel, I do not want you to continue torturing yourself like way. We both had a hard start in life, becoming parents and committing at such a young age. When you think about it, it's incredible that our marriage survived 15 years. That's something we should both be proud of. And consider the positives, our two blunders resulted us two great children who have grown into lovely young people. That's an incredible legacy from our marriage that no one can take away. You're right about that, Mark, I murmured, feeling a little shift within me. Speaking of errors, Mark said with a wry grin, I should inform you that I have made another one. Julia is pregnant, therefore we're bumping forward the wedding date. I laughed quietly. You certainly are mistake-prone. Mark returned my grin, his eyes filled with real affection. You're a fine guy and a wonderful spouse, Mark. Better than what I deserved. I wish you all the best. I hugged him and kissed his cheek before departing. My role in his life had been really fulfilled. All I could hope for was to meet someone as nice as him. But it seemed like a distant shot. Why did I forgive Rachel so easily? For many causes. Hatred may engulf you, leaving only bitterness. She was continually reminded of her decisions just by seeing me pleased with Julia. Even though everything had broken apart, we still had a relationship because of the love we previously had. While I wanted Rachel to suffer penalties, my real vengeance was directed at her employer, Ethan, the one who had drawn her away from me in the first place. I had hacked into Ethan's computer by sending an email that seemed to be from Rachel but included a Trojan that granted me complete access. I realized he had been quietly and skillfully embezzling money from his previous company and was repeating the same technique at his present position. I collected all of the proof and submitted it anonymously to both corporations and the police. Despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Ethan pled guilty during his trial and earned a 7-year jail term. His wife supported him throughout the judicial procedure and visited him in jail with their children. Later, I met with her and gave her further proof of his many indiscretions. She was furious and determined to leave him right away. To finish my retribution, I paid a visit to Ethan in jail. Initially, he didn't recognize me. "Hi, Ethan," I said. "We have really met previously. I am Rachel's ex-husband." "What the hell do you want, jerk?" he scoffed. "I'm here with some messages," I said as I took out a folder. "First, from my ex-wife, Rachel. She sends her greetings and hopes you are enjoying your new house, which I personally helped arrange for you." He looked at me in perplexity. "You know, you really should have hired someone to encrypt your computer," I told you. "After hacking it, I barely needed 15 minutes to locate everything. I couldn't stop myself from telling the cops everything." After his rage subsided, I added, "By the way, I also paid a visit to your wife and presented the images and videos I discovered of you and your girlfriends." She was quite furious. She insisted on having a little vengeance fling in your bed, and I couldn't refuse. Ethan's face became pallid. I grinned, satisfied with having the upper hand. "I have to ask, though, why wasn't she enough for you?" He stuttered, attempting to justify himself, but I was not finished yet. "She was quite wild, actually," I said, enjoying his misery. "That is a falsehood. She wanted me to share these with you," I continued, as I set out images of us together in different intimate positions, even though they had been brilliantly created using Photoshop, which he would never know. "She also had a message, 'Shall never visit you here again, and you won't be seeing your children anymore.'" I gave him one last glance. I introduced her to my lawyer, who handles her divorce. "Oh, and by the way, I am certain you will never hear from her again. She has already moved on. I have everything she needs." Ethan was dumbfounded, his eyes wide open in astonishment. "Revenge is a dish best served cold," I smiled and stood up to go. That's the story. Do you believe the retaliation was worthwhile? Let us know in the comments and remember to like and subscribe.